Hey everyone, Dockwell here, and welcome to another one of my Dota 2 hero guides. Today we're going to be taking a look at Tidehunter. Tidehunter is an offlane hero, pretty much only played as an offlane hero. He has been played carry occasionally with some weird builds that are not bad, but you don't really see them too much in professional or, higher level Dota, so kind of like a meme build. But in any case, we're just going to focus on the offlane traditional Tidehunter. So how do you think about this hero as an offlane hero? Well, most people think about him as this big teamfight ultimate hero, Ravage, where Ravage is one of the iconic spells of Dota 2 going all the way back to the beginning. I'm sure many people that like Dota 2, play Dota 2, have seen these, big teamfight ultimate Ravages that just win games straight up all the way back to the beginning days of Dota. So that's definitely true. That is what Tide does. He is a kind of Ravage machine. But there's another aspect to the hero that you have to think about to make sure that he's being picked or you're playing him in good games where he is effective. And that is that he has a passive ability that's kind of like Slark's ability to shrug off spells. So if you know anything about Slark, Slark runs in and, presses an ability and purges any stuns. So stuns are pretty much ineffective against him. Well, the same thing applies to Tide. Any single target abilities that are dispellable, like a Lion Hex or a Lion Stun or a Venomous Gale from Veno, any of those things that can be dispelled, if Tide takes too much damage, he'll just shrug them off. So he gets tanky. He basically cannot be fully chain stunned, which makes this hero really, really good. And it also kind of makes him able to get Ravage off no matter what. Even if he doesn't blink in and get the best initiation, he can pretty much still get the spell off, which also makes Ravage even that much more effective. But he also has other spells where he can kind of dominate lanes, he can do more damage, he's effective with minus armor strats and all of those kinds of things. But really how you want to think about the hero is, if your only way to affect the game is to just blink in and Ravage, or just Ravage and that's it, it doesn't feel good. If there's something like a Black Hole, a Chronosphere, a Axe Call, whatever it is, if there's a bunch of stuff that locks you down through your passive, kind of similar to Slark, then it just doesn't feel good, because you don't want to only be an ultimate, a long cooldown Ravage hero. You want to be able to frontline, tank, hit towers, other things like that. Just be this kind of bruising brawler, almost like a bristleback in some way. So if you pick him into lineups where you're going to be able to shrug off stuns, tank, frontline, those kinds of things, it can feel really, really good. But it can feel kind of bad in games where he just has to sit back and wait to only Ravage, because if you just don't get a good Ravage, you may just lose the game, and you may feel like, you don't even have a good hero in the game. You're just like, you're just another support practically, or something like that. So that's how to think about Tide. That's how we can think about him in general. Now let's jump in and take a look at his abilities. Now that we understand Tide in general, we can take a look at his abilities and see how he's able to be that kind of frontlining, tanky hero, but also his insane ultimate that's like a, iconic ultimate that wins games. So first we're going to take a look at Gush. So Gush is pretty straightforward. You just click it on an enemy, some water gets spit out, he just spits on you, and you take some damage. You also are slowed and have minus armor. So we see Axe is running away here. I use Gush on him, he's slowed. He has some minus armor debuff for a short time. Now, the thing is, with that minus armor, obviously, it affects your right click, so we see I'm doing a certain amount of damage. I use Gush, and now I'm doing just a slightly more damage here with my right clicks as well. And so that actually synergizes pretty well with one of Tide's other abilities, and so the next one I'm going to show you is Anchor Smash. Anchor Smash is just another ability you can kind of spam. It does damage, but it's a physical ability, and it's AoE. So we see this little AoE here. Anything within that AoE will take damage. So I use it. Any creeps or enemy heroes in that AoE take that damage, and they get applied a small debuff with damage reduction. So these two in combination can be really, really good, because you do some magical damage there, you go up, you slow them, you're able to chase them, you're able to use your Anchor Smash, which then does physical damage, so it actually does more damage because of that minus armor you have. So it's like a very good combination in the lane, or even later in the game, to be able to kill supports, to zone people away from your creeps in lane, all of those kinds of things. It can be a really, really good combination. And then that damage reduction that you see here from Anchor Smash as well is something where you can pretty much just trade with people and trade with the enemy melee carry in the lane really, really well, because they walk up to the lane, you use Anchor Smash on them, now they're just doing less damage. So you can, get denies over them, you can get more last hits, you can trade with them better, all of those kinds of things. So it's just a good combination with these two spells to be very threatening in the game. And you can, so you're not just like a Ravage. You don't just do damage here and stun. You actually can do more with these two spells in combination. So those are his casting spells. Now we can take a look at his ultimate Kraken Shell. And Kraken Shell, pretty straightforward, pretty simple. You just have some damage block, so you're tankier. You're pretty much like have a built-in Vanguard kind of thing. But then the big thing that this ability does is it also gives you that dispel. So there's a damage threshold there that once you take a certain amount of damage, any spell that is casted on you will be dispelled. You'll basically just shrug it off and be able to move on. So Axe is one that has both kinds of spells. The first one, Battle Hunger, we see we can cast there on the Tide, and then Tide will take damage, and basically once Tide takes a certain amount of damage, we see the Battle Hunger will just go away. So right there, we see that there was a small animation with water that just kind of like came out of Tide around his body, and he was able to shrug off that Battle Hunger. Now, this is the same thing for a Lion Hex or a Lion Stun or a Venomous Gale from Venno. Like I said before, anything that's dispellable is really, really good for Tide because he can just pretty much just tank through all of it. Now, the thing that he can't tank through usually, and that is really bad for him, is anything like Berserker's Call that you see cannot be dispelled. So if you look at the ability there, it says right up there, cannot be dispelled. So anything like Berserker's Call, like Legion Duel, like Black Hole, like Chronosphere, anything like that is really bad for Tide because he can't get out of it. He can't shrug it off. He can't make the enemy just like waste their time trying to go on him. So that's Kraken Shell. That's why this hero, it's kind of complicated because you need to know the matchups. You need to know what the abilities are that are dispellable, which ones aren't, all of those kinds of things, and play him accordingly to matchups. You also need to know, how to use these abilities to be effectively aggressive when you can use them. So, and he's not, like I said, not just a Ravage here. He can also pair well with minus armor strats like TA and all those other kinds of things. So that's how you can see that his abilities can make him a pretty unique and pretty complicated hero. Now, obviously, lastly, we have Ravage. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. You click Ravage, and all the tentacles come out and hit everything in that huge AoE. Now, keep in mind a couple things. Obviously, it stuns for a little while. It does a good amount of damage, but also there's a small cast animation, so it takes a little while after you click the button, and the tentacles go out to the edge of the AoE after a short time. So if there's an enemy on the outside of the, periphery of that AoE, they can run away if they see you, using Ravage. The other thing is, we'll give Axe a BKB, we'll pop it. I pop Ravage, we see the Axe is unaffected by that Ravage. It doesn't pierce BKB like some other big AoE team ultimates, and that's pretty much because if it did, I think it would be way too overpowered. Tide would probably be the best hero in the game because of that insane AoE and how good it can be. So obviously, how you use this is you will pretty much always buy Blink on this hero, almost always, and you just blink in, Ravage, catch 2, 3, maybe even the whole team in a Ravage, and it just allows you to set up with your teammates to do insane damage, get all their spells off in the right way, whether you're initiating or counter-initiating, whatever it is. Obviously, this ability can just be so good. Keep in mind, it does have a decent cooldown, decent mana cost, and things like that, so keep that in mind. But, obviously, that's Ravage for you. It's an iconic, quintessential Dota spell. So that's Tide. Those are his abilities. Now let's jump into a game and see how he's played. Now we're jumping into a replay here of Ice 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 playing Tidehunter. This is actually a TI match. He's been playing a lot of Tidehunter and been doing really well on this hero, and he's obviously a great player. But we're going to see this early laning stage, and I just wanted to show you this lane and how aggressive you can get on a hero like Tide with the correct skill build. Now, obviously, I will say as a caveat, he does have this IO partnering with him in the lane, so he's able to kind of skip out on some regen, but we see he's able to get that first blood basically by himself, and the IO doesn't really offer all that much with him. It's not like the IO has a stun or anything, it's just kind of sustain, and that Tide does most of the damage there, with some right clicks there from crit as well. I think there's a little bit of a replay bug, but they are tethered together. But in any case, we can just see how aggressive he can be in this lane. And just while you're watching it, that's the one thing about Tide. Tide, because he has like pretty good skills, 3 decent skills that you can use in all different kinds of situations, he is one of those heroes where, of course, follow the guide if you're lower MMR while you're learning the hero. But one of the keys to the hero is knowing what to skill when versus what matchups and all of those things in the laning stage. Because obviously, in this lane, we see he's going for Gush, we see he's going for Anchor Smash, and this is largely because it's 2 melees, they don't really have any stun, there's no real need to skill Kraken Shell here, and then obviously he can skimp out on the regen. You see he has absolutely no regen. He had one set of tangos he already used, and it was able to go for that early Orb of Venom there. So he's just able to be more aggressive with the IO, but the general idea of the lane still persists regardless because, you know, he's against these 2 melees. He probably would have just bought some extra regen, but he would have skilled similarly and played in a very aggressive way in that same way because there's no stuns coming out in this lane. Spectre is generally pretty weak, doesn't really do anything without a few levels, and so because of that, he's just kind of able to bully people out of lane. But let's say you're a Tide, you're in a game with like a Lion and a Jug. Maybe it's like a Lion Jug lane you're against. Well, you're not going to want to go this build, probably. You may want to put points in Kraken Shell. You may not want to put any points in Gush, because the Gush, you know, aggressiveness that you're going to have is not really something that you're going to be able to do against those 2 heroes. You don't want to get up in their face a bunch. You're going to get stunned. You're going to get spun on, all of those kinds of things. If you don't have any points in Kraken Shell, it's going to be much more likely that you're going to die. So I will say that obviously the goal of Tide is to be able to play up in the face of the enemy. Up in, you know, next to the melee carry, anchor smashing him a bunch, get kills when you can, be aggressive when you can, those kinds of things. But you just need to learn the matchups and the heroes that you're good against or bad against so that you can skill correctly. So it is one hero that you're going to need to adjust your playstyle even early on in the game in order to play this hero like ideally and correctly and get good with them. Because if you don't do that, you're just going to get stomped in some lanes that you probably shouldn't. The other thing I will say is that you see Kraken Shell is a spammable ability. So actually if we go to, I don't know 100%, but yeah, this Spectre already has a stick. Let's see. He doesn't have a stick. The five position Elder Titan doesn't have a stick yet, but we see that a full wand actually on 23 Savage here, and that's largely because as a Tide, you're going to be spamming your spells, at least Anchor Smash, even if not Gush. And so because of that, the enemy is going to probably get a lot of stick charges because they're going to buy a stick. And, I mean, maybe not at your level, they won't, but if you start getting any kind of MMR, it's obvious to buy a stick against Tide. Most people do. It's almost as obvious as buying it against the Bristleback. And so because of that, you're not going to aim to be super aggressive after the early portions of the game. You're just going to look to stay alive in the lane, get your farm, survive, and kind of deny the carry last hits and trade well if they ever approach the creep wave. And that's kind of the goal of Tide, is just kind of stand there, be almost like a Bristleback that just threatens if anyone kind of gets close to you. So that's pretty much the laning stage with Tide. You just want to be aggressive when you can, obviously tailor your skill build to the lineup and the lane, and then just kind of hope to sit in lane and get more CS and outfarm them, because you're allowed to, you know, you're allowed to kind of just sit there and do whatever you want against their heroes, whatever they are, and then you can, you know, reduce people's damage and threaten some damage of your own if they walk up too close. So that's pretty much just Tide's laning stage. Pretty straightforward, pretty simple. It only gets a little bit more complex once we get into the later portion of the game. Now we jumped ahead about 5 minutes or so. We see he's level 6, and he's just being super aggressive onto the enemy carry here, the Spectre here, because he knows that there's pretty much nothing the enemy can do to him unless they bring a bunch of people. But instead of being scared, they're actually going to gank. So they're going to have a coordinated gank as a team. Now, obviously, this is EG. This is a pro team. Your team isn't going to be this coordinated. But the point is, once you hit 6 with Tide here, it's a good idea to either try to use your Ravage offensively to get a kill. You can even sometimes get solo kills on this hero if the enemy's out of position. But, you know, bring that 4 position, even bring the mid, and you'll definitely be able to secure a kill on most carries if they don't just leave the lane. So, obviously, that's a good demonstration of doing that. They dive with all their heroes, get some good kills. Obviously, it's a pro match, so the pros are like counter ganking and all those kinds of things, get some kills of their own from the other team. But in your matches, once you hit this Ravage timing and you're able to Ravage most carries, or especially most 5 positions, you're going to be able to secure a kill. And early on in the game, you kind of want to be using Ravage as much as possible, because you don't really need it yet for big team fights or anything like that. You don't need it to secure Roche. You don't need it, to go high ground. You don't need to save it for any reason. So for the first 10 to 20 minutes, if you have Ravage available, you should be looking to use it, or at least trying to posture in some aggressive way to use it. And then afterwards we see, Tide is just being this tanky kind of guy that just sits here and tries to pressure towers. Now, he's not exactly like a Bristleback. He doesn't threaten as much in that same way. He's also not as tanky as like a Bristleback. He's not as tanky necessarily as like a Timbersaw. He's not this like crazy early game hero once he gets a few levels like they might be, but that's because he's counterbalanced by the fact that he has this late game ultimate that is so good. But he can still kind of be this this threat, this frontliner, this tower pusher kind of thing after the laning stage into that early game where you just want to posture yourself in a way where you're just kind of pushing towers or putting yourself in dangerous parts of the map. And so that's the key, like I said before, to Tidehunter. You want to have a game where you are able to put yourself in this kind of position. You don't want to be forced, I guess I should say, to play passively. You want to be able to be aggressive. And you see he's at like, a third HP, a fourth mana, and he's still able to be aggressive just because of his itemization with Hood and the nature of the hero in this game. So that's pretty much how to think about and play Tidehunter from the laning stage, transitioning into the early game timing. Now, the next thing I wanted to show you here was actually the next time they used Ravage. It didn't go so well for them. Obviously, you see 3 of their heroes are dead. That's not really great. They were looking to get aggressive, but obviously it's a pro match. Things will happen. People will counterplay you. But we see now he doesn't have Ravage, but he's still playing aggressively. Basically, he's putting himself in a spot to defend mid, to kind of put himself in the most dangerous place on the map. So you'll see here in a second, he kind of walks into the river, and he basically just puts himself in this river position to try to defend mid, and almost like daring the enemy to go on him, because really that mid lane right now with the timing that it is in the game and the vision that they have, you see they have no vision of any enemy heroes. He finally sees Spectre top, but he's just walking right here into this middle part of the river, which is like the most dangerous part of the map. But he doesn't care because he's tied, because he itemized correctly. He realizes that they don't have any stuns. I mean, they even have Doom, but he knows Doom is down because of the last fight, so he knows there's really no threat to him because that one big spell that does threaten him isn't up yet. So because of that, he's just posturing super aggressively. Look at this. There's really nobody on the map. All 4 of the enemy could be here except for Spectre, but he just knows, based on the state of the game, that there's nothing they can do to him. And so this is what you want to be doing ideally on Tide. Obviously, he sees that they all show. He does back up a little bit. They even use Haunt for almost like no reason, really. Probably because they do see that the Tide is aggressive there. But look at that. Look at what he basically did that. Ice basically did that with his positioning. He forced out the ultimate. He forced all of them mid, and they didn't even get close to killing him. They didn't even try to go on him because they knew it was kind of impossible. So that's just the summary of how you want to play mid game. Like you see, before you have Blink or anything like that, or maybe when you don't have Ravage, even if you do have Blink, you want to put yourself in a place, if you know you can't die, that, you're going to be able to be aggressive. Posture on the map, pressure a tower, those kinds of things. And that's also key to this hero is, obviously, Blink Ravage, a great thing. It's a game winner, turns fights, wins fights, secures you Roche, all of those things. But the key to this hero, obviously, in the early game, like I said, you need to itemize or to level your skills in a specific way based on matchups. The same thing is true for Tide going into the mid game, is you want to itemize correctly so that you can do what I just showed you there. And you also want to make sure you're picking Tide into a game where you're able to do what you can, or what he just did in that position. Because if you can't do that, then it feels really, really bad. So Tide, even if it is a good hero sometimes, you just want to make sure you're picking it into the right lineup. Now you see, as soon as he gets Blink, they look to be super aggressive. They look to, they smoke up, they go in. Unfortunately for them, they don't really get too much because the enemy team is pretty good. So they only get a 5 position, but that's also what you want to be doing. You see, he postured aggressively. He kind of put himself in the front line. Then as soon as his Blink is up, as soon as he gets enough for the Blink, they smoke up and they go aggressive. And that's something you also want to be doing with Tide. Now, there's a lot of teamwork around that, but there's still, you still have the ability to do that yourself playing in your games, is, call to your team or just be, thinking about the fact that you want to get aggressive when you do have that Ravage up. Now, I jumped into a different game here. Still Ice, still TI-10, still EG, but I just wanted to show you this because this sequence here, not only is it awesome and it looks great and to make these plays feels really good, but this is also a perfect example of just how to play Tidehunter in the later portion of the game. Not only do we see that he's playing pretty aggressively like I talked about in the previous segment, but we'll also watch the kind of perfect Blink Ravages here that he ends up getting off in these team fights pretty much to secure the game for EG. We see that Aster is actually ahead by 2k, and yes, he's playing aggressive. Yes, the game isn't looking that bad for EG, but until this point, it kind of could go either way, and Aster's actually leading in kills, leading in net worth, all these things, but these big Blink Ravages are really what win EG the game. So we see he knows exactly where the enemy is for a brief second, gets a perfect Blink Ravage on 5 of them, allows Arteezy on the Razor to get a link off on the carry. You know, Abed jumps in. It just is the perfect team fight where they get everything off because of that amazing initiation from Ice 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 on the Tide. And that's just a perfect example of what you want to be doing. Kind of hanging in the back, waiting for that perfect moment to blink in and get a Ravage on pretty much 4 or 5 heroes, whatever it is that you can. And that's definitely doable in your games. Obviously, with a little bit of coordination from your team, but there are times when your team's grouping up, trying to push, and that's amazing. And now we see he's kind of hiding this refresher. The enemy doesn't know there's a refresher, and then again, blink in. Amazing Ravage to kill 2, and that's pretty much the game. You see like a 5k net worth swing, 4 heroes dead, no buyback, and that just secures the game for EG. And so that's, I think, a perfect example of Blink Ravage on Tide and how effective it can be. You probably don't even need me to tell you that if you've ever seen any, you know, amazing sick plays like that in TIs from the past. But that's pretty much Tidehunter in a nutshell. That's what he does. But there are those other things earlier on in the game before you get those insane team fight ultimates off that you do need to prioritize. You do need to be playing this hero in an efficient way so that you can't, so that you aren't just a Blink Ravage. You are, you know, doing more on the map, being more effective in the early game, in the mid game, and those kinds of things. So that is my Tide guide. I hope that makes sense for you guys. I hope that helps you play this hero. It is a fun and unique hero to play. Very, very interesting. Obviously, there's a lot to learn with it, with matchups. Also, you know, it's a very team-focused hero as well, but it can win you games like we just saw there. So, if you like this video, guys, like, comment, subscribe, all of those kinds of things. If you want me to look at one of your replay reviews, let me know either here or in the Discord. Go join the Discord if you haven't already. I'll be doing streams every Friday on Twitch. My Twitch is below there. That's where I'll be doing the replay reviews. So if you miss yours, just go to the Twitch channel and the old videos should be there where you can take a look at those replays. As always, I have coaching as well. That's the Patreon link below, or just go and support me there if you want to see more of these videos. But if you want coaching, that's where you're going to be able to get it. And as always, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.